Rally racing is probably the most dangerous sport ever created. Okay, maybe besides free soloing, where you climb a mountain without any equipment. Overall, I think rally racing is incredibly dangerous, as you're moving around a track with tight corners and cliffs at incredibly high speeds. Different sports are usually associated with different countries. American football with America, ice hockey with Canada, cycling with France, and cricket with India. But with rally racing, it seems to be linked with Finland. In fact, there's nothing more patriotic in Finland than launching an Audi Quattro into a ditch and crawling out unscathed. But what does that have to do with finishing a game, you may be asking? Well, let me introduce you to the most painful game I've ever played, My Summer Car. In this game, you're expected to race a car and win a rally race, and you're probably thinking, oh, that's not that difficult. Well, I lied. If you crash the car at high enough speed, you die instantly, and your save is deleted. And you're probably still thinking, well, that isn't that bad. Well, I lied again. You also have to build the car from scratch and tune it to ensure it'll get through the entire race in the first place. Well, I lied again. You also have to do jobs around where you live to get money to buy new parts and prevent the car from breaking down constantly. And finally, on top of this, you have to buy things to prevent you from dying of natural causes like food and exhaustion. And yes, if you're wondering, you can burn down your house and get struck by lightning. I've put 8 hours into this game already and still not finished it. In fact, I've never even got the car to move, but this time I'm actually going to try and finish it. So to begin, I would need a name. Something that invoked power and struck fear into the eyes of my rival racers. So naturally, I named myself Friendly Gentleman, truly a man of class and sophistication. I chose the ugliest colour possible for my car and clicked begin. Firstly was the cutscene where I spawned. Well, to put it more literally, I was born in the great year of 1976. Fast forward 19 years to being a teenager alone in my parents' house. As I was alone, I would have to buy food for myself and pay for the house's electricity and water, so I opted to head to Teemu's shop in town. Along with food, I'd also have to buy some additional supplies for the car. I went round to the back of my house to collect some birthday money from my uncle and the tractor which I would use to go to and from town. I brought the tractor to the front of the house and loaded in some sausages, a case of beer, and a jerry can. I also hit the AFR gauge from the catalogue. I headed on my 30-minute journey to town. Yes, 30 minutes. The area I live in is very remote, so all of the points of interest are extremely far apart. Adding to the time it takes is the tractor, which moves at a snail's pace. Unfortunately, it's my only choice, as the bike back home can only carry one item at a time. As I was heading my way up the hill, I was kindly greeted by my cousin, Penna. Penna travels around the map and you can hitch a lift from him if you're in town and unable to get back. But he travels at such a high speed sometimes that he can crash into trees and kill himself. And you. As I didn't really need a lift at the moment, I ignored Penna and continued to drive my way to town. But something came up. In real life, not in the game, so I had to attend to it. Unfortunately, the only way to save the game in My Summer Car is to use a toilet, and clearly there were none in the middle of the countryside. So I decided to go AFK. Before I did, Penna returned for revenge and crashed into my trailer. Penna continued to use his horn as I was AFK. He was still driving though, and managed to inch the trailer towards me, and then the horn stopped. I was unable to check after, but I think the horn stopped either because Penna had escaped or he just died. After Penna died, I continued to stand until my hunger, thirst and stress all maxed out, until I collapsed and died of dehydration. Honestly, dying in this run didn't really bother me because I had literally done nothing. Now let's do this again. My name this time, Small Fella. Nothing would stop him, not even the Finnish gods would oppose him. So Small was born, left alone in his house, grabbed the extra money, got the tractor, tossed in some beer, sausages, jerry can, and picked the part from the catalogue. Once again, I headed my way to town. I passed the alcoholic's house, by the mechanics, over the bridge, almost got hit by Penna again going up the hill, past the dance pavilion, and finally to the centre of town. Teemu's is a small convenience store in the centre of town. It's the only place that sells literally any food or essentials for miles. I mean, it has a complete monopoly of the market, to a point where you could make beer 1 million marks, and everyone in the area would have no choice but to buy it, as there's no other alternative. Or they could just order it. Timo's is a small business run by this guy.
Sin City was a maybe.
Timo. Whilst at the shop, I bought an alternator belt, brake and clutch fluid, motor oil, coolant, fire extinguisher, 2-stroke fuel, car battery, oil filter, spark plugs, car lights, cigarettes, fuses, chips, juice, yeast, sugar, and sausages. I crammed all of it into the back of my tractor, filled with a jerry can and the tractor, grabbed another case of beer, paid Timo, and then drove another 30 minutes back home. Back home I loaded all my stuff for the car into the garage, and all the food into the fridge or cupboard. After I had a drink, shower, pissed on the porch, and smoked a quick cig before hitting the hay. Cars. They cost a lot of money, and mine was no exception. There are several ways to make money in the countryside. One was delivering fish to grandma from time to time, and the other was drowning a local alcoholic in illegally brewed sugar wine. To do these two things, I would need the fish trap for, well, fish, and the bucket to fill with wine. The only method of getting these items is to head to the centre island in the lake. So I filled up the boat with fuel and drove my way there. On the island I found some fireworks, a camera, the bucket which I filled with water, and the fish trap which I took back to the boat. Back at the house I added the yeast and sugar to the bucket to get the strongest quality wine. I would have to wait a couple of days for this to brew fully, but in the meantime I could move the fish trap into the optimal place. To be quick, I went on the bike, as it was much faster than the tractor, but as a trade-off, I was much more vulnerable. I travelled halfway around the island to the bridge by the mechanic. I headed back home to begin the main event. Helping me build the car was me, and the hours of knowledge I had gained from building the car multiple times in the past. Even though I've built the car 5 times in the past, I still don't even know how to build the car from memory. So I have to use a guide every time. I think it's more of a testament to how many parts and bolts you need to build this thing, and even though I've built it 5 times in the past, it's never even been able to move. I've only ever been able to start it and end up with fuel and cooling issues, but this time it's different. This time I'll finish it in record time and even be able to drive it. The Satsuma takes an annoyingly long time to build. This is mainly due to the fact that there are hundreds of bolts and screws that each require one of the 11 screw sizes. And if one of the screws isn't fully tightened, the entire car can break. And then you're stranded in the middle of the countryside with nowhere to go. Now with that all out of the way, I just had to build the thing. So I put in the subframe, steering rack, steering column, wishbones, spindles, steering rods, disc brakes, half shafts, struts, tail arms, coils, shocks, drum brakes, fenders, doors, boot lid, rear bumper, front bumper, grille, headlights, rear lights, steering wheel, gear stick, handbrake, passenger seat, driver seat, rear seat, lap panels, dashboard, dash meter, clock gauge, radio, crankshaft, main bearings, piston, head gasket, cylinder head, rocker shaft, rocker cover, and headers. That's where I got to until the spark plugs. These spark plugs were the bane of my existence. Before I address the spark plugs, I'm going to have to talk about how engines work though. In engines, a piston comes down, in turn drawing in a mixture of fuel and air. It then moves back up to its highest point until the very last second where a spark plug ignites it, pushing the piston back down via the force of an explosion. Then it pushes back up again and exhausts the fumes. The problem I had was that all but one of the spark plugs would fit in, which is a necessary part for the car to function. I tried everything, switching them around, taking them all out, putting the engine on the hoist, taking the engine off the hoist, removing the rocker cover, removing the rockers. Nothing worked. I saved the game to see if it was a bug or I was just doing something wrong. Finally, after I saved, the spark plug went in. Continuing the build, I put the camshaft gear, timing chain, timing cover, water pump pulley, crankshaft pulley, alternator belt, distributor, starter, engine plate, flywheel, clutch cover plate, oil pan, gearbox, inspection cover, driver gear, carburetor, air filter, oil filter, fuel pump, electrics, fuel strainer, radiator hoses, brake master cylinders, clutch master cylinder, clutch lining, brake lining, fuel tank pipe, exhaust pipe, muffler, gear linkage, battery, and hood. On Thursday morning, I filled the juice bottles with sugar wine to give to the local alcoholic. I took the tractor around to the back to load it up with firewood. I chopped wood for about 20 minutes to fill the trailer up. I'd have to wait until I got a call to deliver the firewood, so in the meantime, I was going to go collect some wheels for the car and deliver the sugar wine. I got the tractor and drove it to the alcoholic's house. Yoke is a local drink, and he pays good for the wine that we make. But on the third bottle he forces me to drink with him, which makes me incredibly dizzy and drunk. It's worth it though for the money.
Money on my head, that means money on my mind.
After the transaction, I continued to head along the dirt path to collect some of our wheels in the barn. My plan was to add some tyres whilst I was at the mechanics. By the time I had arrived, it was already closed, so I just left the wheels at the door. I headed home and went to sleep.
What the hell? Oh my God, no way.
The following day, I used the tractor to head to Timo's and pick up the part I ordered, and buy some more juice as it restocked. I also filled the jerry can with gasoline and the tractor for the trip back. On the journey back, I used the juice bottles I bought and filled them up with the leftover wine to once again sell to Yoke. Once I arrived back home, I got a call about the firewood delivery. Unfortunately, it was too late now, so I'd do it tomorrow. Before I went to sleep, I installed the AFR gauge to monitor how rich the fuel was. As I was doing this, I started to add the wiring to the car, so it would work. After wiring, I poured in all the corresponding fluids, so it would work better. Saturday. This is a moment of truth. Will it start or will it blow up? Only one way to find out. It ran. After all the attempts in the past, it actually worked this time. I inspected the car, only to notice that the oil was leaking. This was an easy fix though. All I did was tighten the oil pan bolts, which seemed to work. To stop the rattling, I turned the distributor by hand. I went to drink some water to restore my thirst, but the water wasn't running, so I had to go pay the water bill at the post box. I went back to the car and started to test the fuel mixture levels for the best acceleration. But as you can notice, acceleration doesn't matter when you have no wheels, and the issue is, I can't go get them because it's the weekend. And on the weekend, rally cars are moving faster around the track, and if I were to get hit by one, it'd be game over, so I wasn't going to go risk it. Realistically, the only thing I could do now was to wait until Monday. During the rest of Saturday, like an idiot, I decided to open the cap of the radiator full of hot steam. This instantly blinded me, leaving only a small area to see, but for some reason, I could still see my hands when smoking and the smoke itself. So I guess smoking is more powerful than blindness in the eyes of a finished person. I managed to make it into my bedroom where I decided to sleep to see if it would remove the effect. It did not remove the effect, so I'd have to wait for it to wear off. After a while it wore off and I started to tune the rocker valves. After that, all I could really do is wait, so I decided to light some fireworks. Like an idiot, I held the firework and became blind once again. After the effect wore off, I made more sugar wine and delivered the bedload of wood, as it was late enough now that the rally was over. I then drove to the bridge to collect the fish from the trap and cook it. Turns out I'm absolutely terrible at cooking because I managed to burn all 5 of them. Reflecting on my decisions, I tossed the trout back into the water and headed back home as it was getting dark. On Monday, I went to the mechanics to go order the cheapest tyres for my rims. I then headed to town to drop off an order for a ratchet set. In addition, I bought some food and a battery. The rest of the day, there wasn't really much I could do but wait again, so I went to sleep early. On Tuesday, I picked up the wheels from the mechanics and attached them to the car. At last, it was complete. Now it's time to take it for a spin. But first, I loaded up with beer because staying hydrated while driving is a necessity. It had pretty horrible acceleration, and was very slow, which may be better for me, as I probably would have crashed by now. I drove onto the open highway, which is significantly more dangerous than the dirt roads, as there are other cars and you're travelling at a much higher speed, so a collision would mean absolute death. I went to go pick up the ratchet set I ordered from Timo's, and the extra gauges, which I promptly added to my car. After I installed the gauges, I went into Timo's pub, as I needed some food. After my encounter with Timo, I drove home in the rain. In the morning, I heard the phone ringing, but due to the darkness, it was basically impossible for me to answer it. I assumed it was Yoke wanting a lift back home, so I drove to town to be met by absolutely nothing. Either I got there too late, or he left because I didn't pick up the phone. On the way back, I went to the fish trap again and fired up the grill to cook them correctly this time. Apparently I just had to wait for the flames to go out to prevent them from burning. After cooking them up, I decided to replace my starter, as I was near the mechanics, and my car kept making this noise. I took out the starter, gave it to Flatori, grabbed the new one, and put it in. On my way back, I was quietly reminiscing on the amount of progress I had made so far. I'd built the car, and surprisingly over my 13 hours of playing, I still hadn't died yet. Also, there was so much more I could do to improve my car, and make it road legal to pass the inspection. Then, I did this. Clearly, as you can see, there was no chance I could continue due to the fact that I was, dead. This incident would have been completely avoidable as well if I had just gone a bit slower. I guarantee I could have survived this crash as well if I had just put my seatbelt on.
But back to the title of this video. I still haven't finished this game. In fact, my playing time's increased to 115 hours.
But now, I really only had two options. I could A, start another run on permadeath, or B, concede defeat and play on non-permadeath where you respawn at the graveyard in town. But to be honest, I'm gonna have to save that decision for another time, but this video has gone on long enough.